And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
What's up, all my movie-loving maniacs? It's your boy Bankfold B of the Lassiter Factor, and I'm gonna take a moment to talk about Pulp Fiction, which, as of this month, is celebrating the 30th anniversary of its wide release. And this is one that I was definitely looking forward to revisiting this year because it's not just my favorite Quentin Tarantino film of all time, but it's one of my favorite films of all time, period, and one of those films that got me into filmmaking. So, let's review. Pulp Fiction is a collection of crime vignettes that are connected and told somewhat out of order, and at the center of these stories are two mobster hitmen, a mobster boss and his coked-up wife, and a boxer. Now, months back, I reviewed both Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, and in that video, I explained that basically those two movies together was the thing that got me into Quentin Tarantino, but this movie here was the movie that made me a fan of him as a filmmaker back in the day. This is definitely one of those movies that benefits from multiple viewings, and it was the movie that put Quentin Tarantino on the map. Well, granted, he had come out with Reservoir Dogs before he made this. Reservoir Dogs made him one to look out for as a filmmaker, but this was the movie that solidified him as a contemporary modern filmmaker back in the 90s. And of course, this movie is part of what I like to call the Big Three of '94, which was Forrest Gump, The Shawshank Redemption, and Pulp Fiction. People consider those three movies the best films of 1994. And while I love both Forrest Gump and Shawshank Redemption dearly, this is my favorite out of the three, and in my opinion, the best. Now, granted, it's all subjective of what you think is the best out of this three. Granted, I still love The Lion King as the best movie of '94, but that's neither here or there. But still, regardless, if The Lion King is my favorite film of '94, Pulp Fiction is my second favorite film of '94. And I still feel the same way 30 years later. God, I loved revisiting this movie, because there is so much to love and admire about this movie, and even back then people recognized how brilliant this movie was, and Quentin Tarantino is a big part of that because of his vast knowledge of film, all the pop culture references you're probably going to get in this movie, whether you're old enough to know them or not, or even recognize them. And of course, with it being a Quentin Tarantino film, you know what you're going to get. Well-written dialogue, a lot of pop culture references, and a lot of shits, fucks, and dammits. Because that's what me, and I'm sure a lot of others, love about Quentin Tarantino, is making use of even the dirtiest of curse words and making them sound good. But in retrospect, I think the reason for me this movie spoke to me in terms of Quentin Tarantino as a filmmaker is because I think this is the movie where Quentin Tarantino, I think he gets me and gets my film sensibilities and why I love film, and even right down to my love of music and having a good ear for a really good song, which I'll get into in a little bit. Among all the things I love about this movie is the well-written dialogue. I mean, this movie gave us some iconic lines that people still quote to this day.
Hamburgers, the cornerstone of any nutritious breakfast.
Respect for one's elders shows character.
I have character.
Because you are a character doesn't mean that you have character.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Whose motorcycle is this?
It's a chopper, baby.
Shut the fuck up, fat man. This ain't none of your goddamn business. Oh, well, allow me to retort.
Fuck pride. Pride only hurts.
Then shut the fuck up! What does Marcellus Wallace look like? What country you from? What ain't no country I ever heard of? They speak English and what? English, motherfucker! Do you speak it? Does he look like a bitch?
But it's also the non-linear storytelling that I love about this movie and what gave me a genuine interest in non-linear storytelling. To me, it's just fun piecing different stories together and pacing them together, that by the end, once I figure out how it all comes together, I'm like, oh. And really big emphasis on the dialogue, because again, another good thing that Quentin Tarantino knows how to do is make some of the most mundane conversations sound interesting. Like Vince and Jules talking about a burger.
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the fuck a quarter pounder is.
And what do they call it?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
He knows how to make good conversations sound interesting, which I guess is relatable to all of us and how Quentin Tarantino movies just gravitate towards us, because it basically puts us in the world that he is in. And what's more relatable than just two guys on the job just shooting the shit with each other, even if they're killers. And of course, the biggest reason why this movie is so iconic is because Quentin Tarantino was able to launch the careers of a lot of the actors in this movie and also relaunch the career of John Travolta. But let's get into this story real quick. And I've always just loved how the movie began with, Tim Roth, who's returning with Quentin Tarantino from Reservoir Dogs, and his wife Honey Bunny, played by Amanda Plummer. And it just starts with them talking about how it's hard to rob different places, but no one ever thinks about robbing a diner, which they do. And then once they get up and start pulling the guns, and we see how much of a loose cannon Honey Bunny is. And then freeze frame, and then the title card comes up in the opening credits. And this is where I gotta bring up the music, because this is one of my favorite opening credits ever, because the first half of it is Surf Rider, and then the other half is Jungle Boogie. And I'm telling you, if you have a good sound system in your home theater, I'm telling you, have it turned up during the opening credits of Pulp Fiction. It just sounds so good. But I love the music in this movie. Quentin Tarantino, he really picked some good tracks for this one, and it's one of those soundtracks that I own a vinyl copy of. But then after the credits, we go to Vince and Jules, played by John Travolta and Samuel L. motherfucking Jackson. Ooh, I'm gonna get to him in a little bit. But like I said, the two of them are just shooting the shit before they have to go in and kill someone, and they get the case, which a lot of people learned is a MacGuffin, and that's where a lot of people learned what a MacGuffin is, and basically the thing that the whole movie is centered around, because they get this case and it's just shining out when they open it up. We don't know what's in it, but it's just something very valuable. But we get that iconic scene where Samuel Jackson, he's just going the fuck off. The iconic...
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
Now, before this movie came out, Samuel Jackson, he was already making a name for himself in a couple of movies he'd been in, like Do the Right Thing, Jurassic Park, Fresh, Jungle Fever, Juice, Menace to Society. But his performance here as Jules Winfield was really the movie that launched his career into what it is today. To me, this is prime Samuel Jackson right here. He's just smooth, cool, calm, collected, and he will let a motherfucker know what time it is when he needs to. But he is also a righteous man, which I'll get more into at the end of the video. But after they kill the person, that's when we cut to forward in the story, and the story is centered around John Travolta's character, Vincent Vega, who is the brother of Michael Madsen's character in Reservoir Dogs, which I am a little mad we never got a Vega Brothers movie. Hey, it is what it is. But Vincent has to take the wife of Marcellus Wallace out, and Marcellus Wallace is played by Ving Rhames in this movie, which is probably the earliest roles that Ving Rhames was ever in, and probably the movie that put him in the public eye as an actor and one to look out for. But Vince taking his wife, Mia Wallace, played by Uma Thurman, which is another career that Quentin Tarantino launched. This was her first major role in the movie that launched her career, and Quentin Tarantino would also work with her again in Kill Bill. But Mia Wallace, she's on a date with Vincent just to keep herself company while Marcellus Wallace is away on a job. They go to Jack Rapids, which is a nostalgia trip in itself, but turns out she is coked up. But regardless, the two of them, they're hanging out and they're getting well acquainted with each other. There's a hint at a possible love between the two of them, but luckily that doesn't get resolved. But there's even a theory in this movie that the pilot that she was trying to try out for was basically Kill Bill. But they get home, she finds his heroin in his coat, and she thinks it's cocaine, but she tries it and she overdoses, and then Vincent basically spends the rest of the story trying to get her to his friend's house so that they can shoot her with an adrenaline shot and basically save her from ultimately killing herself. But somehow this story is so simple, and yet Quentin Tarantino made it so interesting from the performances, the dialogue, the filmmaking, and it also puts you on edge. It's like, oh my god, please save her, please save her. And that's when we cut to Butch's story, played by Bruce Willis. He is a boxer and he was paid to throw a fight, but he doesn't. But even before this, it's really about a watch, which is also the second MacGuffin of this movie, and he gives a story from when he was much younger, from Christopher Walken's character, you know, the old, he had to stick the watch up his ass conversation. And again, well, I'll admit, this is probably, of all the stories within this movie, it's probably the weakest. It's the one where I started to slightly check out, but it still kept me engaged in and out, because especially during the second half, that's when this story really kicks into gear, because again, he threw the fight and now he's on the run trying to get out of town, but his girl left the watch at his apartment, so now he has to go back for it, and Vincent is there waiting there so that he can kill him, but turns out... So Butch tries to go back to his girl, but then he runs into Marcellus Wallace. He runs him over and they're pretty much in a gunfight with each other, and then they end up in this hillbilly pawn shop where they get tied up, and some unspeakable things happens to Marcellus Wallace, but Butch manages to escape. Butch kills the Gimp, Hillbilly number 1, and then he's about to kill Hillbilly number 2, but then that's when Marcellus Wallace comes out of nowhere. We get this iconic line from him.
You hear me talking, hillbilly boy? I ain't through with you by a damn sight. I'ma get medieval on your ass.
But Butch and Marcellus, they come to a truce, and Butch, he gets the fuck out of Dodge, and that's the end of that story. And then that's when we cut back to earlier in the story, back to this moment, and now this story is from Jules' point of view. Well, it's basically about Jules. And again, I like to emphasize the fact that Quentin Tarantino was able to make a mundane situation and make it interesting from the performances and the dialogue. So Vincent accidentally shoots Phil Lamar. He goes to his buddy's house, played by Quentin Tarantino himself.
Did you notice a sign in the front of my house that said dead nigga storage?
Really leaning in on them racial slurs, huh, Quentin? And so he calls him the Wolf, played by Harvey Keitel, again, another alum from Reservoir Dogs. And so they get the car straight, they change their clothes, they have the car crushed in a yard, they all good, and then they end up at that same diner at the beginning of the movie, and that's when they rob the diner, and then Jules Winfield, he tries to set the situation straight, and he really does, because after the moment where they were spared at the beginning of this particular part of the movie, he has a change of heart and decides not to kill him and decides to give him his money, but not before giving him back his wallet that says "bad motherfucker." And I just always love basically the ending of this whole monologue right here, because it's basically the point of the story where he talks about, you know, the whole Ezekiel 25:17, and he basically explains that. And I've always loved that message, because it's like, at the end of the day, we're all just trying to be good people, but sometimes life and sometimes circumstances just puts us in situations where we have to do bad things. Granted, we don't always fall into that point, because these are still criminals at the end of the day. They're still bad people at the end of the day, but it's just the whole message of we're all just trying to be shepherds. And then the movie ends in the best possible way it could, which is them putting their guns away, walking out of the diner, and then cut the credits. And that's really it. I mean, I don't know what I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said, because I can gush about this movie all day, but you know what you're in for when you watch this movie or rewatch this movie. This is the best Quentin Tarantino has ever given us, in my opinion. And he's given us some great things after this, of course, but this will always be the one where I can, if somebody asks me, what's the best movie that basically encapsulate everything about Quentin Tarantino, I'm gonna show them this movie right here. Like I said at the beginning, this is my favorite Quentin Tarantino film of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, just for the storytelling, the characters, how it launched a lot of careers. It's one of my favorite Samuel Jackson performances, and like I said, this movie also relaunched the career of John Travolta, because his career was in a bit of a slump at the time, but then Quentin Tarantino, he scooped him up, put him in this movie, and put John Travolta back on the map as a legit actor. It launched the careers of Ving Rhames and Uma Thurman and Samuel Jackson, furthered the careers of Harvey Keitel and Tim Roth, changed the way we told stories within movies and changed the way we look at movies. It definitely changed the industry. It put indie movies on the map, because let's be real, this basically is one of the most expensive indie movies ever made. And that credit goes to Quentin Tarantino, because this movie definitely made Quentin Tarantino one to watch as a filmmaker. And his career just got better from there. Pulp Fiction abso-motherfucking-lutely gets the hands up emoji because it is a masterpiece. Thank y'all so much for watching. Have you seen Pulp Fiction? You probably have, but if you have, tell me your thoughts about this movie, and do you think it's Quentin Tarantino's best movie? Let me know in the comments section below. This your boy Bankfold B of the Lassiter Factor. Stay safe, wash your hands, and until next time...
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!